Hello and good evening, everyone. Welcome to Paytm Money Talk. And the topic for discussion today is retirement planning, how to invest and plan for your retirement. Retirement planning is a very crucial aspect of financial security that individuals should prioritize through his working lives. As we say, retirement period is a golden period of one's life, right? And we all want to make it as stress-free, fun-free, fun-filled as much as possible. However, it is easier said than done because it involves lots of careful consideration of various financial factors to ensure a completely comfortable and stress-free retirement. Now, first and foremost, earlier one starts, better it is because of the compounding factor. Because longer the compounding factor plays, you have got a bigger retirement corpus. So today we're going to talk about all the pros and cons, discuss about how one should plan, how one should look for what are the different instruments available to plan your retirement. Now, as an investor, if you are looking to plan for your retirement, or even if you're working, not yet haven't thought about starting your retirement plan, investing for retirement, it is a good time. This session is definitely going to give you lots of insight as to how to go about it. I'm Neeraj Gogoi, an investor, educator, and host for the talk. And this talk is powered by Paytm Money. Okay, before I start, let me very quickly tell you what the Paytm Money Talk is all about. We have been doing it for last almost 2 years. And what we try to do is that we try to bring in new concept, new investment ideas, new strategies, so that one can consistently keep on improving his financial gain. As you have to. It's something you have to keep on learning. If you are a good investor, if you are you have to keep on consistently improving. So that's the whole purpose of this particular Paytm Money Talk is. And today, to talk about retirement, got a very special guest, and he is Mr. Gaurab Parija. He's the head of sales and marketing at Bandhan AMC. Gaurav had nearly 3 decades of experience in the sales, marketing, and business development and driving strategic initiatives. Prior to Bandhan Mutual Fund, he was at Franklin Templeton as a director. He was responsible for new initiatives and business development. Before that, he was associated with Franklin Templeton Asset Management as national sales head and sales director and head, alternate distribution. So it's a great to have Gaurav today. Gaurav, welcome onto the stage.
Thank you, Neeraj, and thanks Paytm Money for having us on the show. Great to be on part of
Thank
the
you.
show.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Gaurav, of course, when we talk about retirement planning or anything, the foundation is, of course, the financial market. We have to, because ultimately we all directly, indirectly involved with financial market. So when you look at our market, what we have seen, we had a fantastic rally in last few months. Then we are seeing some kind of a correction. So what do you think about our market now? Going ahead, 2014 is going to be a very crucial year. Election is coming. War is not stopping, Ukraine-Russia war. There are so many things that are happening. So what's your view on the market as a whole from the medium to longer term perspective?
So it's a very interesting and pertinent question. I think the way I would want to take it is first start by stating that a very important statement Benjamin Graham has put on the markets, which states that stock markets behave like a voting machine in the short run and like a weighing machine in the long run. So what happens in the short run is very difficult to call, but clearly over the next 5, 10, 15 years, we think India's trajectory of growth is going to be solid. There would be multiple issuances in the short term, which could derail the market movements. Having said that, when you look at any country, there are three pillars of growth of a country, which is consumptions, investments, and exports to that extent. And when you split it, we believe from a consumption perspective, we believe
Mm,
domestic consumption will do far better than companies which are aligned to global consumption, because clearly there is going to be some pressure on global growth. From an investments perspective, while the private investments have not picked up, I think the government is doing a lot of heavy lifting in terms of spending and
mhm,
investments. And from an exports perspective, while the whole world focuses on what India does best in IT, ITS services exports, quietly over the last 4 5 years, professional services exports has grown rapidly. So if you combine all the three, we seem to be ticking two out of the three boxes. So we think
mhm,
the next phase of growth of India is fairly solid. Uh, Globally, also, when you now look at India from a multiple aspects, be it geopolitical risk, be it or FX reserves, India seems to
mhm,
be far stronger placed. And the fact of the matter is, from a GDP growth perspective, India is still the fastest growing GDP in the world. And it's not of a small base, it's now a large base. We are the fifth largest GDP in itself. So I
mhm,
think if someone is looking to allocate money into equities, very tough call to give on the short term. I don't think, like many people who've lost their jobs calling the markets on the short term, I would want to be in that list. But on a medium to long term perspective, I think India looks solid. The other thing I want to bring out, and which is something I've been very passionately talking about, I think a lot of Indians do the mistake of looking at creating portfolios over the next 3 to 5 years. I think that's a
mm.
fundamental mistake. And as we talk through the session, I think people have to now look at creating portfolios for 20, 30, 40 years, because we in
Oh,
India are going to live for that long, and not look at what's going to happen in the next 3 months to 3 years. Because while someone can give you clarity on 3 to 5 years, why bother about 5 years? Because both of us on the show are still in our mid. I'm in 52, you'd be in your 40s to 50s, and we are not going. Nothing is going to happen for us till the age of 80, 90. So why even consider an investment horizon of 3 to 5 years and not look at 20, 30 years? And from multiple aspects, I think India looks very solid. So clearly, and again, I can't give a bullet answer of saying should you add more in equity or not. It all depends on your current portfolio, your current asset allocation and goals and all of that. So I don't have one single bullet to fire.
wonderful. So long term is the way to create wealth, and as Gaurav says, not even 2, 3, 4, 5 years, but we should look for 10, 20, probably more than that. Wonderful, because that is where. Now, coming back to our core question today about retirement. In India, people tend to get ready for retirement when he is crossing around 55, right? Before that, to all fun. So actually, what is retirement planning? Why it is so important in a country like India? Because we are not developed countries like Europe. Why it is so important? So tell us something about that.
I think it's again a very pertinent question, and like you rightly said, when I talk to my cousins or brothers, and I talk about or ask them a question, have you planned for retirement? The first pushback is saying, "वो तो बाद में आएगा, why think about it now?"
अभी भी
But some
जवान हो.
alarming some alarming statistics. I think it was done by a survey by leading insurance companies that 1 in 3 Indians are potentially going to outlive their savings. 90% of people who have crossed the age of 50 are now regretting
Hmm.
the fact that they have not planned for the retirement. And why
Correct.
is retirement planning important is, to give you a very simple statistics. When India got independent, the average
Mhm.
mortality age of an Indian was 36 years, which effectively meant that an average Indian used to live for only 36 years. As we
Hmm.
speak, that number is close to 60, 65 years, which effectively means an average Indian lives for 60, 65 years. And with increasing advances in medical sciences uh, and the ability for people to eat better and live a healthier life, I'm quite certain that many of us on this call should plan to live for 1995 years, which effectively means if you are a salaried person, you are going to spend 1/3 of your life on your savings, which is
Hmm.
not a small period of time. And hence, for planning for retirement, has to be started much earlier. The other reason why planning for retirement is critical is, unlike many other things which you can do at a later stage. For example, many of us want to run the marathon at the age of 30, but end up you can do it at 50 or 60. You really cannot reverse the clock in terms of your age. And hence, if you delayed your planning for retirement, which is surely going to come at some stage of your life, even if you are an entrepreneur or a self-employed. The
Hmm.
sooner you plan for it, the better. And I think when in your shows or otherwise, people would have heard this multiple times that the earlier you save, the better or the more power compounding ability you have. So that's why it's critical to plan for your retirement. And that's the reason we've been very vocal about the need to do retirement planning.
Okay. Now, as you said that now because of the improved healthcare and all, our life as span has really improved substantially. So, at uh, what age I ideally wants to start? Is it like 20s and 30s? What is the ideal stage? We know that sooner it is better it is, but there are so many other priorities are there. I have to build my house. I'll have to, buy my car when I'm young. So retirement always seems to be at a slightly on the backside. So how can one really seriously think about it? When should start thinking about it seriously?
So again, I think we don't want to put people off in not being able to enjoy their lives and be
Hmm.
academic in saying the day you start your job, you should start planning for retirement. The way to handle it is till your initial years as you are building your income, and hopefully you have some money going out into your retirement plans, be it your EPF or NPS. That should be sufficient. But as your income grows, and your expenses obviously don't need to go at the same level, you'll be left with the investable surplus, and that's
Hmm.
when you should seriously start planning for retirement. In that, one of your goals has to be, apart from trying to buy a car in in 3 years, going abroad in 10 years, education of your children and all of that, do carve out a significant portion for your retirement. And in line with that, the other thing we keep talking about is people ask us a lot as to what is the secret sauce for creating wealth. And I
Hmm.
always go back to them and saying that the secret sauce for creating wealth was something we studied in class 8th or 9th, which is the formula of future value is equal to present value into 1 plus r raised to the power n. So each of the elements in the equation gives you a larger kitty at the end. So if your current amount of investment is high, your future value is high. If your rate of return of your investment is high, your future value is high. But all of us know that in the equation, the most powerful multiplier is the n, and hence the
Hmm.
number of the maximum n you can have in that you can plan early, the more the value at the end of your investment period. And that's why it's critical to start early. But don't want you to get too caught up in saying that, oh, everything, the moment you start earning, you should put away everything in retirement and not enjoy your lives. Do enjoy your life. That is what we are working for. But as and when your investment surplus builds up, one of the goals for sure has to be retirement planning outside of your mandatory savings. Because, like I
Hmm.
stated, please plan that you're going to live a significantly longer life uh, over the coming years than what Indians were doing earlier. The second reason why you need to start early is whether you like it or not, inflation continues to hit us at a regular pace. So do
Correct.
budget that in, and hence the old cliche saying that the earlier you start, the better. And that's the reason we all people in the financial world keep talking about it and repeatedly, while at the cost of repetition, keep saying the same thing.
Correct. And what is the amount that one should look for? And since we have to get serious about building our retirement corpus, what are the ideal different product mix or portfolio? Should it be how one can look at? Should it be completely different portfolio? What are the different products that I can have it in my portfolio for retirement? And how much? How much to decide? Like 1 crore, 2 crore? How much is good to go for a retirement?
So ideally, I would want all the money to be in Bandhan retirement fund and in mutual funds. But to
Yes,
be
we're
more
going to talk about that.
practical, to be
Yeah.
more practical, I think the first step, again, it's not one size fits all. I think the way I would want to plan for my retirement is what are the expenses I will definitely have after retirement. Now,
Correct.
to put that in perspective, the expenses I will have in retirement is hopefully by the time I retire and I'm earning for 30, 35 years, I would have got my house. So my rentals will be
Mhm.
zero. My liabilities towards my children in terms of education and marriage would be done and dusted. So basic expenses are there going to be expenses towards my health, towards my daily living expenses, my
Mm.
food, my house help, and all of that. So that you need to calculate and estimate today. Let's say that value is 30,000 per month. And don't include your EMI, don't include your education of your kids and all, because those hopefully would be taken care once you hit 50, 60, whatever time you want to hit. Then you assess that if inflation were to go at 5%, so if you are 30 and you are spending 30,000 for your basic core expenses, that 30,000 at 5% will become close to 1,50,000, which
Correct.
effectively means if you need 1,50,000 every month from a pool of savings at a certain withdrawal rate, is the kitty you would need to create. And the very simple way is to come into our website or multiple websites, which will give you a calculator. I'm sure Paytm Money will also have that, and calculate that number and start early and invest. I think where a lot of people fail is they know the value, they procrastinate on it, think about it, and don't execute. That is where the rubber doesn't hit the road.
Right. In fact, Bandhan is also coming up with a retirement fund. In fact, it's already started from 28th September, and it's going to close on 12th September, October, right? So what is the core things? What are the important things? Why Bandhan retirement fund is going to be different than other retirement funds? Can you take us? And also, I would like to
Sure.
request all my viewers कि अगर आपका माइंड में कोई भी क्वेश्चंस है, यू फील लाइक आस्किंग एनी क्वेश्चंस, प्लीज feel free, आप क्वेश्चन पूछिए बिल्कुल, and would love to ask that question to Gaurav. So Gaurav, if you
Yeah.
can tell us about your Bandhan retirement
Sure.
fund.
If you can, if someone can put that one two pager up, I think I'll quickly take you. So the like I've been saying, the reason we've introduced this fund, and if you read at the right at the top, we've actually called the theme out saying "कुछ गलतियां सुधारी नहीं जा सकती," which
बिल्कुल.
effectively means that each one of us has a lot of bucket lists. For example, I clearly think at some stage I would want to go to Antarctica. I want to do a marathon. I want
Yes,
to save enough money to go on a holiday. Many of the things, there is no age barrier. We think we've heard of people who run ultra marathons at the age of 90. So if you really have the will
absolutely.
and mind, you can run. But one of the things, like I said, you cannot undo or reverse is the fact that you will cannot take your years back. So if I'm 52, except for Back to the Future movie where the person could go back in life, in reality that doesn't happen. So this is something you should not be regretting. And like we said here, 90% Indians above 50 years regret not starting early. Now, why is retirement planning critical? Like we alluded to earlier, I think the life expectancy of Indians is growing. People have to factor in post-retirement longevity of close to one third of their lives, to the extent of 30, 40 years of something they have to live off their own savings. India has moved from what I call a defined benefit system to a defined contribution system. What I mean by that is many of our parents or grandparents used to work for the government bodies, and government organizations
Mm.
had this magical concept called pension, which
Yeah.
gets readjusted every time, and hence they really need to think about creating a separate kitty for retirement. Sadly, in
Mm.
India, or fortunately India, whatever you look at it, we moved away from the system, so it is left for every Indian, each individual, to create his or her own retirement kitty. And the second point why retirement kitty is important is whether we like it or not, inflation is eating into our savings. I remember when I joined the industry way back in the mid 90s, and I used to
Mm.
present on asset allocation and how the damage inflation can do. My colleagues had put up a slide saying the cost of milk 20 years down the line, which was 12 rupees in 95, will become 70, 75. And I used to laugh saying, look, it's a mathematical equation. I don't think milk will ever become that costly. But lo behold, a liter of milk is actually 70, 75 today. So the
Exactly.
whole impact of inflation is also going to continue. And as we've seen in this bottom part of the table, if your expense was 30,000 10 years ago, after 20 years it's going to become 1,30,000. So while inflation will be under control, all that, there is a natural inflation which is in the market and economy, and we'll have to assume for that. Now, one of the biggest erosions of one savings in today's time is on healthcare.
Mm.
and and so even if you plan to have a large kitty and something happens to you or your family, a significant amount of erosion also happens. So the retirement planning is also critical, to have a large kitty to not only sustain your daily expenses, but also at some stage to take care of anything if it happens on your health side over this period of time. So, and that's why it makes it that much more important to save for retirement. Now, how is the Bandhan retirement fund slightly different? I think,
Hmm.
firstly, we have only one option in the retirement fund. The fund will be run on a balance advantage asset allocation model, which
Hmm.
effectively means depending on the market conditions, your allocation and debt and equity will keep shifting,
Hmm.
and that's the big difference, and hence it will automatically adjust itself to market levels. And I think many of you on the call would be familiar with the balance advantage or dynamic asset allocation models,
Hmm.
and that's what we want to bring into the table. The reason we think that's a good option is because in retirement being a goal which is so imperative, we think a moderate approach as against a very aggressive approach helps. And
Hmm.
two, this fund will help you not only build your wealth when you're in your accumulation phase, but you don't have to, when you reach your retirement age at 60, don't have to then switch plans to a more conservative plan so that your kitty lasts longer. So the same plan works brilliantly in the way up in accumulation, and in the disbursement phase also the same fund takes care of your withdrawals or your systematic
Hmm.
withdrawal plans or your annuity, so as to speak. And that's why this fund is fairly different from what is there in the market,
Okay.
which is
So
part
one
of the
one
second
fund.
page.
Hmm.
If
Go
we
ahead. Go
quickly
ahead,
move to
Gaurav.
the, yeah, I think in the next page of the presentation we cover that the retirement fund has a model based approach, dynamically asset allocates between equity and debt, and on the
Hmm.
equity side it's actively managed, and it's one fund which takes helps you get the both the benefits of creating a portfolio up to the age of retirement, and from then on taking out some money from your savings or final pool to meet your expenses and your annuity.
Hmm. Okay, so one fund in both the stages, accumulation phase as well as dispersal stage after post 60 when I
Withdrawal
start
phase, correct,
living on my fund and withdrawal. Now you said
correct.
that whole fund is going to be based on the balance advantage or dynamic asset allocation. In fact, there are many people who are quite new to the mutual fund. They know like equity fund, debt fund, and all. So what is a balance advantage or dynamic asset allocation? Can you just give a little bit of idea? And what is the
So,
advantage? Why
correct.
this is a long term? How it plays out?
So one of the things a lot of investors ask us is what is the right time to invest in the market? Like you alluded in
Mhm.
the beginning, that markets seem to be high. Should I put more money and less money? So a
Yes.
dynamic asset allocation or a balance advantage fund, which is used in the industry, is a fund which moves dynamically between equity and debt basis some factors we measure. For example, we look at trailing P, we look at credit spreads, and depending on that, the fund manager makes a decision to be overweight in equity or underweight equity. And what that
Mm.
means is, as an investor, you just buy into this fund, you let the experts decide whether it is a good time to be overweight equity or it's a good time to be underweight equity, as against you trying to time the markets with your limited knowledge and understanding of the markets. The expert does it for you. And that's the big difference between investing in a pure equity fund or a pure debt fund. And so the fund manager bases some certain set of parameters and rules, decides the amount of money which will be put in equity and the amount of money in debt. So in a way, the fund will work is, if the markets are cheap, the allocation to equity tends to be higher. If the markets are expensive, the allocation to equity would be lower. And basis obviously not only just a simple parameter of P, but we take into consideration other aspects as well. Now, from an investor's perspective, how does that help? It helps you that if you are really not into the world of investments, like many of us are not, you let the expert decide your allocation levels
Mm.
and gives you the right allocation of equity and debt, as against you trying to make decisions every 6 months or 1 year of toggling between equity and debt.
Yeah, I think this is a very important point that you have made, because many a times, people who have got a little bit of understanding about the stock market, they think that look at small cap, mid cap, they have been doing so much, I can create much more wealth. Why I need to go for a conservative ideas or something like that? Or I can, put my money directly into the stocks and, see the stocks gone up by multiple times. So actually, it's very difficult in the long term, and that is why balance advantage is, I think, designed in such a way that it takes into, you don't need to think about timing the market, right? It's for a long term
Correct.
purpose, long term vehicle. Now, Gaurav, how much
Correct.
one should look for? How much money one should SIP? Of course, when I'll be putting my money over a period of time, I should be doing an SIP, right?
Yeah.
And how
Yes.
much one should look for? How one can decide how much money I should put? Is there any kind of formula or something that I can follow?
So again, it's a difficult question to be asked of a manufacturer because we'll be biased in saying put all your money in SIP. But the way to
Right.
approach this is, let's say you earn 100 rupees, and this is net of taxes and all of that. You
Hmm.
clearly have to first take out all the mandatory expenses you have, because we don't want you not to enjoy your life and all of that. So the basic needs of whatever expenses, rent, and all of that is gone. Let's say you need 40 rupees for it, so you're left with 60. You clearly need to ensure that you have an emergency corpus of close to 6 months to 12 months kept aside. And if that is already
Correct.
filled up, you don't need to allocate any more to that. And let's say you need to just keep 10 rupees out of that. So the balance is 50. What I would urge people to do is, the whole aspect of earning is to enjoy life. So carve out 10, 15 rupees for what I call your play money or your fun money. You want to have a vacation, you want to enjoy good things in life. The residual amount you need to invest in SIP, but clearly create buckets of what you want to do that money to do for you. It's not that you just put one money and perpetuate for 30, 40 years, but create these short, medium, long term goals, saying that I need to achieve something over the next 3, 5 years. That goes into one SIP bucket. I need something over the next 10 years, that goes into one SIP bucket. And the typical requirements of an average Indian is, you need to save for, like I said, for your retirement. Many of us aspire to buy a house 5, 10, 15 years down the line. Many of us would want to at least give the children's education part of it. Marriage may not be the requirement now, because many
Hmm.
of us now believe that we have to make our children capable of leading their own lives. You may not hold them further. So those are the elementary goals which one needs to prepare. Increasingly, more people are now trying to pick up a passion or a hobby they want to pursue. All of these are carved out into buckets, plan SIP, and the asset allocation for each of the buckets differently. But in all of this, like I stated in the beginning, retirement for me is one very core and important bucket which you need to fill. So how much maximum you can do on that is best. But my caveat in all of this is, don't stop enjoying your lives for something you want to create 20, 30, 40 years down the line. That's not the whole reason for you to invest. Then life becomes boring because you're not enjoying. Plan that out, and the best way to do it is talk to distributors, advisors who will guide you on that.
Absolutely. I think you have said beautiful things that ज्यादा सीरियस भी मत बन जाना कि आप प्रेजेंट को ही भूल जाओ and we need to balance between both. And then again, you said another thing, like it's always better to take some help from good financial advisor, right? Gaurav, I heard about something, a rule called 4% rule of retirement. Is there anything something like that? Can you throw some light into that?
So I think the rule of 4%, if I'm not mistaken, is a rule which works in the developed markets, where they basically say that you should withdraw more than 4% of your kitty on a monthly basis to fund your expenses. The way I would twist it for India is, again, coming back to a number. Let's say at the end of
Mhm.
your retirement, you have you built a corpus of 100 rupees, and you put it in a solution or strategy which returns 6%. What you have to plan for is, the amount of money you withdraw should be lower than
Hmm.
6%, otherwise you'll eat into your purpose. So effectively, as you retire and at the age of 60, you want to be moderate, or you don't want to be very aggressive, neither conservative, because remember, from 60, you have to plan for another 30 years. This is where the Bandhan retirement fund comes in handy, because it's a moderate plan. So assuming you'll make you have to plan that I'll make risk free plus 2% return. The amount of money you withdraw should be lower than what the underlying savings grows at, and hence you will have money for perpetuity, as against running out of money over the next 10, 20, 30 years. The mistake people make is, they tend to withdraw much more than what the underlying is growing at, and then they run out of money, which is one of the big things which is coming through in the survey, that many a Indian, because they started planning for the retirement late, are left with a very small amount of residual savings,
Hmm.
and their expenses are already such a high level that they have to withdraw more than what the residual earns, and hence the fear of running out of money after 15, 20, 30 years. Statistically also, it's been found that there are 3, 4 states in India where the number of people elderly not having a social security net in India is larger than some countries in Europe, which is a scary thing. So while India is doing great on the other aspects, demographically India is strong, number of young people in India is the highest in the world. The downside also is Indians are also in India. There are a lot of states, and the percentage of elderly people is also on the rise, and that's where we don't want our investors or people on the show to realize the fact of why retirement planning is critical.
Absolutely. In fact, recently we have come many newsletters, news articles, news items where you have seen elderly people. Sometimes, in their younger days, they were fantastic teachers. Found in a footpath or some. This is so sad. This is so heartening to see this kind of things. I think that is why in a country like India, retirement planning is so much required. uh, Gaurav, when we talk about retirement planning, is there any risk tolerance? Like while choosing the investment vehicle, we need to profile our risk and accordingly, or how do you say that?
Again, I think there is no straight answer. It all depends on how early you started. For example,
Hmm.
thankfully, because I've been in the mutual fund and financial services industry, my approach to retirement planning has started at a very early stage, and I'm at a stage where I could be classified in the fire mode, where I could
Hmm.
retire now and financially independent. Now, depending on how you planned your retirement and what amount of kitty you've got, if the kitty is large enough, and I think many of us on this call, given that India is doing well, GDP per capita GDP is increasing, many of us will create wealth which will be fairly significant at the end of our working careers, and hence your ability to take on risk in your residual savings will be much higher, because you don't need to be very conservative, because your expenses will be still limited. And I keep telling people that as you age, your ability to spend will start reducing, because at a certain age you cannot eat what you are eating at a younger age.
Hmm.
At a certain age you may not be able to travel the world like you did earlier, so your expenses will keep moderating. And if, unlike earlier where the savings was limited and you have a larger pool of savings, your ability to take risk goes up. For example, if I have to if I have 100 rupees and I just need 1 rupee every and I earn 10 rupees from the 100 rupees, and I only have to spend 50 paisa, so I have to spend 6 rupees but I'm earning 10. It effectively means the balance 4 is like an income for me for that year, which I can put away for my next generation. So my ability to take risk then becomes higher. It all depends on how much kitty you end up at. So if you've not planned early, then your risk tolerance will naturally fall, because that's the kitty you'll have to maintain for a longer period of time. But if you started planning for retirement, and that's what you've been talking about, and I've been saying that the earlier you start, the ability to have a larger kitty and hence your ability to take risk will increase. That's how it will
Yes.
work out.
Yes. So I'd like to request our viewers also, if you have got any questions, please feel free. Go ahead, type your questions in the chat box, and would like to put that questions to Gaurav. Gaurav, any tax consideration that I need to take into consideration while planning for retirement?
I think, firstly, with the new regime, the government is pretty much made it very clear that there are no tax incentives being given if people follow the new regime. In the old
Hmm.
regime, the other alternatives are typically, barring only one option, which is triple E, which is exempt in all when you invest and when you withdraw. Even your NPS is, when you invest, you get some tax benefit, but when you withdraw, it's taxable. The advantage of a mutual fund, which does a equity categorization, is that on a long-term basis, it's taxed as a long-term capital gains, which is 10% as of today. So from that perspective, I think over the coming years, people have to realize that tax arbitrage could potentially reduce. It could so happen that
Hmm.
irrespective of whatever category or whatever investments you are, the taxation on that could potentially be the same. As of today, equity mutual funds clearly have the best tax advantage in that long term is taxed at 10%, short term is at 15. Most others would be fully taxed, except for the PPF, which is obviously for a limited period. and your employee provident fund if you're a salaried person, which is fully tax free. But barring that, everything gets taxed. And now, above a certain threshold of interest, even in your EPFO, you get taxed, which is as per the new
Mhm.
taxation. Again, having said that, we are not the experts on tax and tax advice. I would strongly recommend each one of you to talk to your tax advisor in doing that. But my belief
Mhm.
is retirement planning cannot take nuances of tax because you're planning for 30 years down the line. You really don't know what will be the tax status or the rules at that time. So plan as if you have to pay full tax of your withdrawal. That's the worst thing which could happen. And calculate backwards as against saying that, oh, when I retire, I'll be tax free. That's the I will do a worst case scenario rather than a best case scenario.
Mhm. Okay. So, Vinod, there's a question from Vinod Pal. He said, should we start investing in stocks rather than mutual funds? As 90% of the fund managers are never able to beat the index. So again, as I said, we discussed this question, but again, Vinod has asked this question very specifically.
So there are two elements to the question. Firstly, I don't want to get defensive, but I would want to challenge this answer or believe that fund managers are not able to beat the index. In some categories, fund managers may not be able to beat the index, but if you do look at multiple funds across categories, I think in India, active fund managers are still able to beat the index. The
Hmm.
question is whether I should invest in stocks rather than mutual funds. Or the first element is I really don't know what Vinod does, but there are two ways to create wealth. One
Hmm.
is you create wealth by whatever you do as a profession. So I'm head of sales in a mutual fund. I do sales for mutual fund and I get some salary. The other way to create wealth is whatever I save, I invest, and from that investments I create wealth. My belief is that if you are not into the field of investments and spending more time on reading about markets, researching stocks, understanding stocks, you should rather concentrate on your profession. So the question you need to ask yourself
Exactly.
is, if I am a athlete or if I'm a doctor, is my chance of multiplying wealth be better if I focus on that profession? I get to know the latest in what happening in medicine, the latest in surgery. I'm able to fine tune or get my craft in doing what I know best. Or should I dibble dabble in stocks? And 99 out of 100 times the answer would be, oh, if I focus on it's like saying, should Neeraj Kapoor focus on throwing a javelin or buying mutual funds or stocks? And I think all of you will believe that he's made far more money by focusing on throwing a javelin rather than buying or trying to beat the index. And so the way to handle it is you focus on your profession. Let there be a professional investment manager, which is a mutual fund, take care of your money. I think many a time where we lose the plot is we are trying to debate whether A or B is right. And by the time we decide between stocks or mutual fund, all our money is sitting in a asset class which is giving me 3 to 4%. So make the first leap, even if you think that you have to get and buy an index, buy the index fund. But I would still challenge this concept that 90% don't beat it. It's not true. In some categories, obviously, of late, they are getting challenged, but there are enough and more categories where fund managers are able to create alpha and beat the index.
I think what you have said is extremely important, extremely useful. You have said out of your experience. Whatever my profession is, whatever my passion is, I should be doing that. Let the professional fund manager do the needful. And only because, and again, it's easier said than done again. People might think that, yes, if the stock has gone up by 5 times and if I invest in that stocks, I will also multiply my wealth by 5 times. It's very easy to say, but reality could be altogether different, right? So I think you have brought in a very fantastic insight on the whole thing. Now again, there's another thing. Now let's say fund managers, I'm at the age of 20, 25, 30. I've got still 20, 25 years, and I know that I have got different stocks, different categories of mutual funds. I have got small cap, mid cap, large cap, micro cap. And I have seen in last few months, that small mid caps have done exceptionally well. So why not put my money on those long term equity funds? Because I know that in a longer term, India is going to shine harder, brighter, and I'm going to create more wealth, right? So what is your say on this? And also, I'd like to request our viewers that अगर आपका mind में कोई भी questions है with respect to investment with retirement, please feel free. आप पूछिए जाके questions को type कीजिए and would love to answer that, discuss that for you. Yes, Gaurav.
Yeah, so Neeraj, I think again this question needs to be addressed in a different way. So it's like
Mhm.
people asking me, I want to go from point A to point B. Let's say
Correct.
that's your problem. So tell me what I should do. So then I tell them,
Mhm.
point A to we know is here. Define
Hmm.
your point B for me. So if someone says I'm working at One India Bulls or One World Center
Uh-huh.
in Prabhadevi, point B is Prabhadevi railway station. The first
Okay.
person tells me that. The second person tells me point B is Bhubaneswar, and the
Uh-huh.
third person tells me point C is US. Now, my
Okay.
answer to going from point A to point B in all the three will be very different. So,
Mhm.
point A to point B in the first instance could be you could just walk down to Pravadevi station from one center. In the second instance, you can literally walk down to Bhubaneswar from Bombay, but it will take you 30, 40, 50 days. So, you could either take a train or a plane or a combination of buses. But if point B is the US, you would want to set a world record to walk to the US. So you'd rather have to take a flight because even if ship will take you long. So whenever people ask us, what should I do with my investments? I keep coming back to the same thing that define what are you investing for? I think we get too
Hmm.
caught up on returns. It's the definition of point B which will help us address or tell you what solution you need to take. If someone tells me I'm going to invest because I need to buy a house 1 year down the line, I will tell him absolutely zero equities because over the next 1 year, equity could be down 30, 40, 50%. But if someone tells me I need to plan for my retirement 20, 30 years down the line, then I will ask them to increase the allocation to equity because, like you rightly said, over longer periods of time, both in the US, across most markets, and in India, equities outperform every other asset class and beats inflation. But I think the question we are always asked is without your definition of the end goal, my allocation to equity or the answer of how much you should equity is actually a very hypothetical answer if you were to ask me. It's just a
Mhm.
random answer which is not going to solve your problems. I think you have to be very clear, like I said, on the question of how much to save for SIP. You have to be very clear. It looks very mundane, it looks boring. But like George Soros once put it, that if you find investing entertaining and fun, you are in the wrong place. I think that's the mistake people make. They want to get excited on every day seeing their red or green on their tickers or their portfolios. That's not going to solve their problem. They have to focus on what are they saving for, and then decide how much of equity, fixed income, and other asset classes they need to have.
Wonderful. I think we have discussed Gaurav, different pros and cons today. How to plan, why retirement planning is so important, and as we started living, inflation is one of the reason. And of course, you have come up with a new NFO, and it's going to be a very exciting one to see. Gaurav, in conclusion, what is your final advice? If you can sum up the whole thing, somebody who have just logged in, because it's a YouTube show, many people might have just logged in, and what is going to be your final advice? How can you sum up the whole thing, retirement planning thing
So
for a investor? Yeah.
yeah, so to sum up, I think firstly we believe retirement is an absolute sure goal everyone has in their lives. Either you're self-employed or you're salaried. This is one bucket list which will come up in your lives. Uh, Two, this is one bucket list which we need to start early because we cannot reverse our age. We can reverse everything else in life. We cannot reverse this. Uh, the fact is that as Indians, we will uh, tend to live much longer than our parents and our grandparents. Hence, one has to assess that you will have to be saving for a longer longevity than earlier. Fourth, inflation is going to keep coming up on an ongoing basis. So the amount of money you need to spend today versus 30 years later is going to be on the increase.
अच्छा,
And
just I would
given
like
all
to
of
interrupt. अ, एक श्री जगन्नाथ जी महाराज ने लिखे हैं कि थोड़ा उनको हिंदी में समझ में, इंग्लिश में समझ में नहीं आ रहे हैं, तो आप कृपा करके थोड़ा हिंदी में भी बोल दीजिएगा.
ठीक है, तो हमारा मानना ये है कि मैं शुरुआत से मैं शुरू कर रहा हूँ कि
हाँ जी.
रिटायरमेंट इसलिए क्रिटिकल है कि आपका जो भी गोल्स है लाइफ में, आपको बच्चों को पढ़ाना है, छुट्टी लेना है, रिटायरमेंट एक श्योर शॉट गोल है। ये गोल और ये जो नीड है सबके इंडिविजुअल के हिस्से में आएगा लाइफ में। एक दिन यू हैव टू मीट। इसके लिए जितने जल्दी आप प्लान कर सकते हैं ये अच्छा होगा, क्योंकि कोई भी चीज को आप रिवर्स कर सकते हैं, आपका एज रिवर्स नहीं कर सकते हैं। और जैसे
बिल्कुल
कि मैं शो में बोला कि वेल्थ क्रिएशन का जो सीक्रेट है, फॉर्मूला है, वही है कि हम जो स्कूल में पढ़े थे कि फ्यूचर वैल्यू इज इक्वल टू प्रेजेंट वैल्यू इनटू 1 + r रेज टू द पावर n। और इसमें n सबसे ज्यादा मल्टीप्लायर देता है, इसलिए रिटायरमेंट प्लानिंग इज क्रिटिकल। इंडिया में क्योंकि अभी एडवांसेस ऑफ हेल्थ साइंसेस हुआ है, एन एवरेज इंडियन जिसका एवरेज एज ऑफ सर्वाइवल इन इंडिपेंडेंस 35-36 साल था, अभी 65 हो गया है, आगे जाके 80-90 हो जाएगा। यानी कि आपका एक तिहाई आपका जिंदगी का आपको अपना रिटायरमेंट सेविंग्स के ऊपर जीना है। इसलिए जितना जल्दी आप वो सेविंग्स के लिए प्लान करेंगे उतना अच्छा है। दूसरा चीज क्यों ये क्रिटिकल है, क्योंकि इन्फ्लेशन हम चाहे ना चाहे, वेदर आरबीआई इसको कंट्रोल ना करे, इन्फ्लेशन तो होता ही रहेगा हमारा डे टू डे एक्सपेंसेस में। और जो चीज आपको आज 30,000 रुपया महीने का लगता है, वही चीज 30 साल के बाद 1.5 लाख हो जाएगा। यानी कि आपके पास इतना पूंजी होना चाहिए जिसमें से आप हर महीने 1.5 लाख भी निकालें, फिर भी आपका पूंजी आपको 30-40 साल मेंटेन करना है। चौथा चीज, आपको रिटायरमेंट क्योंकि थोड़ा लंबे अरसे के लिए है, हम ऐसा एक प्लान लेके आए हैं जिसमें आप अपना एक्यूमुलेशन फेज, यानी कि जब आप सेव करते हैं वो फेज में भी आपको इक्विटी ट्रेडिशनल इनकम से ज्यादा रिटर्न मिले, और जब आपका फाइनली विड्रॉल का फेज आता है, आप वही इन्वेस्टमेंट से विड्रॉ कर सकते हैं विदाउट हैविंग टू स्विच टू अदर एसेट क्लासेस।
बहुत बढ़िया। एक फाइनल क्वेश्चन है गौरव जी, ये विनोद पाल से ही आए हैं। सर एक बता दीजिएगा कि कितना रिटायरमेंट कॉर्पस होना चाहिए, कैसे कैलकुलेट करें? आई थिंक ये हम लोग लास्ट क्वेश्चन ले रहा हूँ एंड या
एक्चुअली डिपेंडिंग ऑन, लाइक आई सेड, आपका एक्सपेंस कितना हो गया। आप कोई भी फाइनेंशियल वेबसाइट या बंधन म्यूचुअल फंड का वेबसाइट में आएंगे, उधर एक कैलकुलेटर है, आप उसमें आपका वैल्यूज एंटर करेंगे कि मेरा मंथली कितना एक्सपेंसेस है, मेरा करंट एज कितना है, मैं कब रिटायर करना चाहता हूँ, व्हाट इज द इयर्स आई थिंक आई विल लिव फॉर, 85-90। उस
करेक्ट।
हिसाब से वो आपको एक कैलकुलेट करके बता देगा कि आप यदि 90 साल जीना चाहते हैं, आपका उम्र अभी 40 साल है और 60 साल में आप रिटायर करेंगे, और आपका मंथली खर्चा 30,000 आज के दिन में है, तो आपको 60 साल में कितना फाइनल कॉर्पस होना चाहिए जिससे आप मंथली एक अमाउंट निकाल सकते हैं विच इज इक्वल टू 30,000 ऑफ टुडे एट ए इन्फ्लेशन रेट ऑफ 5%। वो कैलकुलेटर आपको बता देगा। सो अंटिल आई हैव दोज नंबर्स, मैं वो इमीडिएटली नहीं बोल सकता हूँ 1 करोड़ चाहिए,
नहीं
2
बोल
करोड़
सकते।
चाहिए, 9 करोड़ चाहिए। बट रफली हम लोग जो, मेरा जो याद में आ रहा है कि यदि आपको 30,000 रुपया आज का खर्चा है और आपको वही 30,000 30 साल के बाद 1.5 लाख हो जाएगा मंथली, तो आपको लगभग 8 से 9 करोड़ का इन्वेस्टमेंट चाहिए टू मीट दैट एट ए विड्रॉल रेट ऑफ 5-6%। दैट्स योर बॉल पार्क, बट वो आप कैलकुलेटर में देख सकते हैं।
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल, थैंक यू सो मच। एंड विनोद जी, एक्चुअली ये देखिए आप, इट्स नॉट अ नंबर। हम लोग नहीं कह सकते कि 1 करोड़ 2 करोड़ 5 करोड़ इज अ नंबर। इट डिपेंड्स ऑन मेनी थिंग्स लाइक एज गौरव हैव सेड। So, Gaurav, thank you so much for discussing a very important aspect that is retirement planning. And as we said, now it is a skill, it is a fundamental thing that we need to take into consideration while planning our finances. And I'm sure the viewers, they have gained a lot, and at least who have not started thinking, not started thinking about retirement planning, now they will look at it more seriously. So thank you so much, Gaurav, for being with us,
Thank you,
and
Neeraj,
looking.
for and Paytm Money for having us on the show. It was great
Thank you,
talking to you.
thank you, Gaurav.